Okay, so for this video, we've moved on to the example section of the handout. And actually, I'm gonna sort of back up for a hot second here, and I'm gonna provide an example. So let's start with an example. Let's say somebody says, let's say you like superhero movies. By the way, I really like superhero movies. I am a mega fan of superhero movies. Um, this is the point at which someone would say, "What are your favorite movies?" And I would say, my number one superhero movie of all time is Logan. And number two is Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse. And number three is an old movie from the early 90s called Batman Returns that you probably are not familiar with. But it's from like 1991. It's amazing. And then Thor Ragnarok. I think those are my favorites. Um, so I love superhero movies. But sometimes you'll hear people say bad things about superhero movies. Sometimes you'll hear people say, let's say someone says to you, and this is something a professor might say, superhero movies, and this is my voice. I don't know why I'm doing weird British voice today. Superhero movies are juvenile. Superhero movies are juvenile. So that's a quote. Now, let's say you were going to talk about this in your paper. So you would say, Professor blah, blah, blah at BMCC said in a lecture, superhero movies are, quote, superhero movies are juvenile. You see how you did all the things, right? You put the exact quote, you said who said it, you said their rank and why they're an expert, they're a professor at BMCC, and they said it in a lecture, right? One of your professors said superhero movies are juvenile. Cool. Okay, so that's something, let's just pretend that's something you heard a professor say, okay? Now, your first instinct might be to explain why this guy's wrong, but let's not do that yet. Before we do that, let's make sure we understood what that guy's talking about. So he says superhero movies are juvenile. So let's start with this. Do you know what juvenile means? You may have to look it up. That may be a word you are not familiar with. And so you go to the dictionary, and there's a good chance you know what that word means, but let's say you didn't. Or let's say you think you know what it means, but you want to be extra sure. So you look it up in the dictionary. We'll talk about dictionaries later. So you look it up in the dictionary, and it turns out juvenile means having to do with children. So superhero movies are juvenile, the professor was saying. He's saying that superhero movies are for little kids, and that's not something adults should be watching. So now you've got your exact quote, and you put it in your own words, because you probably wouldn't say superhero movie. If you were going to say his idea, first of all, you probably wouldn't say that at all. But you want to put his idea in your words. So he says superhero movies are juvenile, and you sort of try to figure out the idea. What does juvenile mean? And then you put it the way you would say it. This professor, who, so Professor blah, 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 in a lecture, said superhero movies are juvenile. In other words, he thinks that superhero movies are for small children. And that's step 1 and 2 of what we've been doing so far, because you introduced what he said, you said exactly what he said, then you put it in your own words. You're doing good. Now at this point, now you're ready to say, oh, here's why this guy's wrong, but you're not ready to do that yet. You got to understand what the hell he's talking about first. You're not quite done. So the next thing you're going to want to do is you're going to want to start the next sentence with, for example. Now, the problem is you don't agree with this guy. You think he's wrong. But you got to at least think about, why would he say that? There's a tendency to be like, if you disagree with someone, to be like, you're wrong, blah, 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 blah. But you got to stop, you got to listen to them, and you got to figure out, what are they saying? Here's the tricky part. Why would they say that? What is he thinking of that makes superhero movies so juvenile? So then you're going to put some examples down. And these are not examples of what you believe. These are examples for what he believes, but you got to pick the examples because you're writing the paper, which means you have to imagine, why would he say that? So let's try to think of some things. So, for example, that professor might be thinking of the fact that little kids like bright colors. You ever bought toys for kids? They're very brightly colored. Also, little kids hate being bored. They like exciting things happening all the time. If you've been around little kids, they don't like to sit still. They don't like to just think. They like excitement and action. Little kids don't want to watch a movie where everybody sits around talking for 2 hours. They want to see a lot of exciting things happen. So bright colors. So you say, for example, in Avengers Endgame, the characters wear very bright colors. That's very, like Thor Ragnarok, Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse, very, very bright colors. But also, a lot of exciting things happen. Into the Spider-Verse is not a boring movie. It's an exciting movie, and little kids like things that are exciting. They want to be entertained at all times. That's what little kids want. If you've ever been around little kids, they want you to play with them, and they want you to play with them for hours and hours and hours and hours. And if you try to stop, they're like, no, 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 no. They want to be entertained. Little kids also like happy endings. It makes them feel safe. Little kids love a happy ending to a story. You don't when you get to the end of a little kid movie, it's not like everybody gets murdered or it's real sad. They like happy endings. So you could talk about in Spider-Verse has a very happy ending, even though bad things happen along the way. It has a pretty happy ending. And so now you've got some examples, right? And so what you could do is you would say, now this is, and now you've done everything I've asked you to do in this first section, which is what you read. So you want to introduce the quote with who said it, say why they matter, make sure what you're worth quoting, make sure what you're quoting is worth quoting. Is the person an expert? Put the quote in your own words, and then give some examples. So in our example, Professor blah 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 in a lecture in a history class you were in said superhero movies are juvenile. In other words, he was saying that superhero movies are for children. For example, he may be thinking of a movie like Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse, where it's very colorful, it has a happy ending, it's extremely exciting, because these are things children like. Now, even if you disagree with the dude, you still got to put all that stuff in your paper. Do you see what you've done here? You've written a whole paragraph already. If you can do that, you got a whole paragraph right there. And I'll let you in on a little, well, I'll come back to that trick later. Now, maybe I'll say it now. You can have as many examples as you want. So your example section could go on. You could just, I would recommend in a paper for me, I would just want one example from one movie, maybe two. But boy, you could keep going with example after example after example. If you need to make papers longer, don't stop at one example. Do 5, do 30. That's a lot. But the point is that you could have as many examples as you want. That's how you get papers that are quite long. The difference between one of the most important things about this handout I'm giving you, this will teach you how to write a 2-page paper for my class. But it will also teach you how to write a 10-page paper. It'll teach you how to write a 40-page paper. It'll teach you how to write a 70-page master's thesis, and it will teach you how to write a 300-page doctoral thesis, which I fucking did. So it's, how is that possible that this same piece of paper could work for all of them? Because the difference between a very long piece of writing and a very short piece of writing is the number of quotes, the number of examples, but the basic structure: quote something, put it in your own words, give examples. You could quote 100 things. You could give 45 examples for each quote. And you see how you're getting into books? It's like book length already. You can keep going as long time with this stuff. So these tips I'm giving you are for writing something of absolutely any length. Because in a paper, for our class, you're probably going to want to do most things on this piece of paper once. But as you move forward, you're going to do these things again. For a longer paper, you simply do the same things, but more than once. So instead of having, say, 1 quote or 2 quotes, you could have 45 quotes. Instead of having 1 example, you could have 45 examples. And that's how you get papers that are very, very long. It is possible to write them. I know it seems hard, but this is the class where you learn how to write a lot, and this is how you do it. I hope you can see already we've got a pretty good-sized paragraph here with multiple sentences in it, and we haven't even gotten to your opinion yet. So I think it's going pretty well, and I hope you're seeing how this all comes together. Remember, these are moves you can make, but there's nothing to prevent, and I think if you can do these, you'll be fine. But there's nothing to prevent you from doing them multiple times over and over and over again. So that is how you do it. So I will pick this up in the next video where we get to the most important part, which is your opinion. And by the way, I was looking at the handout between making videos. If you can do all this stuff, I think you're going to have an A in the class. If you can just do from here to here, just this section, you probably have a B. This is a B. If you can do this, you got a B. If you can do more than this, you got an A. But really, if you just do the part I just taught you and the part I'm about to teach you, if you can just do these 2 things in every paragraph, you're probably going to have a B. And if you want the A, you just got to do a little bit more. It's not difficult. Okay, cool. I'll see you in the next video.